And we directly move on with the next keynote. The next keynote is being presented by Dr. Simon Lucas. Dr. Simon Lucas is a lead expert in bioethics and digital ethics at Merck. And he's presenting a keynote about digital, with the topic or with the subject, digital ethics and business practice, operationalizing a principle-based ethics framework at Merck. With this being said, the stage is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction, and also thanks for having me today. It's a pleasure to present a little bit of what we do at our company. So I would like to spend the next 15 or so minutes talking about how we try to operationalize digital ethics at Merck. First of all, I want to spend a few words talking about what we do at Merck to better understand why we believe ethics matters to our business activities. So we are a global science and technology company with more than 350 years of company history. And quite uniquely, we operate across three rather distinct business sectors. So first of all, we have a healthcare business, which is a traditional pharmaceutical business. But we also have a life science business, in which we manufacture and distribute lab supplies, lab materials, chemicals, and so on. And we have a semiconductor and electronic materials business. And as you can imagine, this leaves us at a rather unique position on the marketplace, but it also opens the door to quite broad diversity of ethical questions that we have to deal with. So why do we believe bioethics and digital ethics is really important to our business? So we are a science and technology company, and we innovate at the forefront of science, and we innovate in areas that are subject to broad societal disagreement and ethical controversy. For example, we are world market leader in fertility technologies. We are also leading in stem cell technologies, in developing genome editing tools. So all areas that have been constant subject to ethical disagreement. And because we operate at the forefront of science, we very often have to make decisions in areas or in situations where the regulation is not yet very clear, or in situations where there is no regulation at all. So therefore, we believe it's necessary to make ethically defensible decisions in these gray areas. Of course, we also want to meet societal expectations if they are ethically justified, and we believe establishing trust is important to guarantee smooth consumer uptake and acceptance by patients and customers. And this trust, of course, needs to be earned, and it can be earned by showing that you behave ethically, you use patient data in a responsible way, and so on. And needless to say, of course, behaving unethically can have severe consequences for companies, financially, or from your reputation, even if your behavior is compliant with the law. It is safe to say that in bioethics, we have a very strong tradition in our company. We have been dealing with bioethics questions for many, many years now. So questions, as I mentioned, in genome editing, fertility, stem cell research, stem cell technologies, also in health economics, in clinical trials in resource-poor countries with certain patient populations that deserve special considerations. So we have a strong history here. We have a dedicated group that deals with questions in bioethics for many years, and we have an external advisory body that is advising us for more than 10 years now. But more recently, we also encountered questions in the area of digital ethics, and that will be the focus of my talk today. First of all, a few words on our existing panel. So this is our Merck Ethics Advisory Panel for Science and Technology. It has been established more than 10 years ago. And it has been instrumental in helping us to find answers in very difficult to resolve ethical questions. Fertility, for example, and stem cells, as mentioned earlier. They were also very helpful in anticipating certain ethical risks. And together with our advisory panel, we have drafted a variety of different company principles. For example, we have a principle on genome editing, we have a principle on stem cell research, fertility technologies, and these are actually principles and guidelines that are binding for the employees. So if you happen to be a Merck employee working in the area of stem cell research, then you have to know the guidelines and you have to follow the guidelines. And I think here it is also safe to say that some of these guidelines have really prevented us to make wrong decisions in some areas, because we had guidelines in place before in other companies, other geographies, some ethical controversies burst out. And also I think we contributed to the scientific discourse by publishing some peer-reviewed articles on areas that have not been chartered by other companies or academic institutions. Okay, that much on the bioethics part. So why is digital ethics important for a company that is mainly dealing with pharmaceuticals and life science products? One thing certainly is the fact that across all our business sectors, digital business models and innovations are becoming more and more important. Digital health solutions in our pharmaceutical sector, remote patient monitoring. We just recently announced and invested into a new innovation field called bioelectronics, where we try to develop medical devices that implanted into the body read certain signals from your nerves and can also feedback impulses to your nerves to have potentially therapeutic effects. In life science, we have e-commerce activities for a long time, so that is an important part of the equation. The trigger why we really delved deep into digital ethics was the foundation of Syntropy, a collaboration project with our company and Palantir to structure patient data and make patient data accessible for researchers. And when we brought this topic to the attention of our bioethics panel, what the experts told us was that they weren't really capable of answering all the ethical questions, because they were not really familiar with all the technical intricacies, and importantly also the foundation was not really clear. So in bioethics you have questions that are hundreds of years old, like the question of when does life start? That's something that even Aristotle wrote about. So there is a foundation of principles, so especially medical ethics. You have a certain principle-based frameworks which you utilize to resolve ethical problem statements. But that was essentially absent in digital ethics. Of course, there were some kind of basic rules like do good and avoid doing harm, but there was not a really solid foundation. So that also needed to be sorted out. And that's what we had to do, of course, because we wanted to proceed with the collaboration, and we also wanted to proceed in a responsible and ethically defensible way. So what we did, we took care of both of these aspects. So first of all, we established another panel, which we call the Digital Ethics Advisory Panel, a panel that is dedicated to help us resolving ethical questions revolving around our digital initiatives, and composed of experts that are capable of answering questions related to digital health, law, compliance, and so on. And then the second exercise, together with this panel, we established a principle-based framework that could serve us as the basis to resolve these ethical questions, and also serve us as a moral compass to make decisions in a responsible and ethically defensible way. So that's the current composition of our Digital Ethics Advisory Panel. As you can see, renowned experts in their fields, from regulatory, AI in healthcare, digital ethics. We have a patient representative. We also have a bioethicist on the panel. It's also, I should also mention here that we are in the process of recruiting new experts to the panel. At the moment, it's really focused to serve the needs of Syntropy, so quite US focused, focused on helping answering questions in the context of medical problems. So this is the current composition, and still growing to also serve the needs of other business sectors and other geographies. This here is a snapshot of our principle-based framework, which we call the Code of Digital Ethics. I cannot really delve any deeper into how we arrived at these principles. So in brief, it consists of 5 core principles, which we divided into a set of subsidiary principles. And each of these principles is accompanied by some guiding principles that help us to make business decisions on how to proceed with our R&D projects and so on. If you're interested in finding out how we arrived at these at these principles. That was done together with an academic partner in a scientifically sound approach. It's been published in AI and Society earlier this year, so this is freely available. If you want to learn more, just click the link here and you will find out how we arrived here. It's also important to say that this Code of Digital Ethics has been approved by our board of directors as a company charter. So it's the highest quality level of documents in the company. That means it's binding for all employees. All employees will get trainings on the Code of Digital Ethics, and those who are working in digital areas will receive special training on our Code of Digital Ethics. Okay, so where did we go from here? So at this point, you may well say that's nice to have this principle-based framework and some advisors, but that's just kind of lip service. How do you operationalize these principles? And I want to share a few examples of how we did this and how we still are doing this in our company. So first thing we did was we created a governance structure and process to handle questions that we are dealing with in a very systematic way. We call this a principle at risk analysis, and the way it works is once we receive a request from one of our business sectors, we perform a systematic analysis. So we have a set of systematic questions that we answer for each of the problem statements to find out whether or not one or more of the principles of our code are affected if we do not care about the problem statement. And based on that analysis, we generate a report that we use as a basis for discussion with our panel. So we try to resolve any potential controversies and conflicts between the business activities and the principles that we have committed ourselves to adhere to in our Code of Digital Ethics. So how does that look like? Just one example from Syntropy. So again, Syntropy's business model is to help data creators, it's mainly big cancer centers in the US at the moment, to structure the data and make the data accessible for research. And Syntropy also facilitates access to the data by research centers or other pharmaceutical companies, but at no point owns the data. So one question that came up by our colleagues from Syntropy was, what about patient consent? Do we care about patient consent at the side of our collaborators, at the cancer center side? Or can we just lean back and say, well, we provide the solution and you take care of the consent procedures, and we just trust you that that is fine. There would be, of course, one position here, and the panel acknowledged, of course, that Syntropy has rather limited leverage in implementing consent procedures, but they gave the advice to, first of all, perform regular reputation checks of these business partners, especially before entering a collaboration, find out whether the consent procedures are ethically justified or whether there are some conflicts with our Code of Digital Ethics. They also recommended to reach out proactively to patient organizations, because of course one integral part of informed consent is information. So provide information, tell patients what's going to happen with their data once they are treated at one of our partner organizations, and consent to sharing the data. And finally, they also recommended to find out, together with cancer centers, collaborators, whether there are new consent procedures that we could work on. Consent procedures at the moment are really risk management tools, but could they move into something that makes the patient more of an informed ally? That is just one example of the questions that we were dealing with in the past. One last example, so from another part of the company, what we did here is, or the problem that we had in one of our data intelligence and analytics units was that the team came up with some projects where they thought there were some ethical issues, and they asked us whether it's possible to have a look in all their total project portfolio. But as you can imagine, with around 700 use cases in constant development, that was not really possible for us. So we tried to establish an automated risk assessment tool. And what we did is we developed together with the team a rule-based in-process scoring system that can help detect potential conflicts with our Code of Digital Ethics, with the principles outlined therein. And the system, or the final product that is now being integrated into the project management software, can also recommend self-assessments and further mitigation measures. So that's just in the process of being rolled out, implemented into software, and next step will be collecting data, how well the system performs. And yeah, that was my last slide. So I want to conclude with just summarizing that, of course, one important thing of our, one important task of our group is to make business decisions in a way that they are ethically justified, and we act in a moral way. But it's also here, and that's the experience that we have from more than 10 years in bioethics, to also make the business flourish. So navigating in gray areas in a responsible way, also in our opinion and experience from bioethics, leads to success of the business. And yeah, with this, I would like to thank you for your attention and happy to take any questions from here.
Thanks a lot for the insights. Do we have any questions already? We have one here.
Hello, thank you for the talk. Regarding this last case that you represented in terms of use case analysis, how did you set the red line, let's say, for it being ethical or not ethical? Is you base actually the, let's say, the principle that you use internally for your system that you use actually for what you explained in the slides initially, or is that you apply actually a red line for the AI Act or the regulation, or do you make a mix of both of them?
So at the moment, so that's still, we are still testing the calculation of the risk. So what we do, we don't draw any red lines in the projects, and also depends on the maturity of the project. So in an early stage of the project, you just get a flag. So keep that in mind if you progress with the project, to constantly reassess these potential ethical issues that you have. But what we want to do is we don't provide an ethical go-no-go. We just hint to potential conflicts with our code of digital ethics. So the output is based on parameters, kind of really non-philosophical light parameters that the project managers have to put into the project, like who's being affected by the project, what kind of data are you using? Are you using personal data, or are you just using some technical data? And based on that, we calculate a risk score. So it might, at the end of the day, it might be the case that it's just bad luck that you have a high score, but if you do an analysis, an in-depth analysis, there's not really anything that would be kind of ethically prohibitive to proceed with the project. So it's more like hinting to potential issues that you then, depending on the maturity, so on the mature stage of the project, have to look in more detail, and then you make a kind of individual assessment together with the head of the intelligence unit, and if the kind of ethical risk persists, they approach our digital ethics team, and we try to help to resolve the problem.
Thanks a lot for the question. Do we have more questions? Then I would just add a question, just linked to your question at some point. You mentioned the AI Act. So you have your ethics framework in place, and the AI Act is like future regulation. Does it fit? Or is like there's convergence, or how do you get those things together?
Yeah, good question. Of course, I think there is significant overlap between the AI Act and our Code of Digital Ethics. But generally, I think in ethics, philosophy, law, and ethics do not always coincide. There are some overlaps, but I think ethical considerations will remain important even if regulation is in place. I think we see the same in the space of bioethics, medical ethics. So we have the German Embryo Protection Act, which is one of the most prohibitive regulations with respect to use of stem cells and embryo research. But still, of course, it's important to have ethical discussions and regulations, because there are so many areas that are not covered by the Embryo Protection Act, like embryo models, chimeras. So ethics will always remain important, even if regulation is there.
Mm-hmm. So it's linked, but it's not the same for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. I think this was very interesting, Simon. Thanks a lot for your keynote. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Simon later, directly after his presentation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.